This is the Samsung GX10. First introduced in September of 2006, this camera features in-body image stabilisation, weather sealing, and it uses the KAF2 lens mount. It's the first and the last DSLR camera from Samsung to feature a 10.2 megapixel CCD sensor, and that's exactly the reason why I've picked this camera up. Initially, I was looking for the Pentax K10D, and for anyone that doesn't know, that camera is basically identical to the GX10. And the reason for that is that Pentax and Samsung had a collaboration of sorts in the mid-2000s, with their DSLR cameras sharing pretty much all of the same parts. Starting out with Samsung's first DSLR camera, announced in January of 2006, the GX1S, to which the Pentax counterpart was the IST DS2. In February of 2006, Samsung announced the GX1L, and Pentax the IST DL2. All four of these cameras shared the same 6 megapixel CCD sensor. Later that year, we got the Samsung GX10 and the Pentax K10D. And the last joint effort between Samsung and Pentax came in 2008 with the Samsung GX20 and the Pentax K20D. So you might be asking, why didn't I just pick up the last camera that Samsung made, the last DSLR camera, in the GX20? The simple answer is that that camera uses a CMOS sensor, and I really wanted to find a camera with a CCD sensor because I've heard and seen a lot of good things, a lot of great things about the colours and the tones that those sensors produce. In terms of what the Samsung GX10 brings to the table, it has a fairly decent 0.95 times optical viewfinder, a 2.5 inch rear LCD screen, which although is only 210,000 pixels, gives off a fairly nice bright image. Samsung's OPS, which is optical image stabilisation, and you guessed it, it's pretty much the same as Pentax's shake reduction. And it's great to find this feature is present on the GX10, as I've gotten really used to using shake reduction with all my Pentax bodies to stabilise new lenses as well as old manual lenses. The ISO range of the GX10 starts at base ISO 100 and goes up to ISO 1600 with a maximum shutter speed of 1/4000th of a second. We've got an 11-point autofocus system with a maximum burst rate of 3 frames per second and a buffer that kicks in at 9 frames in RAW. So I don't think that the GX10 was really made for sports photography, but me being a sports photographer, I'm going to put it to the test because I don't really care what spec sheets say. Although something that I did find strange was that the Samsung lenses for the GX cameras don't sport any weather sealing, so you're not going to have a fully weather sealed setup, which again I find very strange, being the body is weather sealed. And the only lenses that I can currently find on the used market for this camera are the kit lenses in the 18-55mm and the 50-200mm, which again sadly aren't weather sealed. Although when researching, I found that the Samsung lens lineup consisted of a 10-17mm fisheye lens, an ultra-wide angle 12-24, a 16-45mm zoom lens, a 35mm prime, and a 100mm f2.8 macro lens. And what a coincidence, Pentax produced all of the same lenses. So now with all of the specs out the way, I think it's time to see what the Samsung GX10 is like to actually shoot with in the real world. In order to test the Samsung GX10, I decided the best place to start would be in a local woodland. I found the GX10 on eBay, and the camera came with two lenses, the 18-55 kit lens, which I'm using here, and the Tamron 70-300, which I'll show you some shots from later on in the video. I've included several straight out of camera images to show how the 10 megapixel CCD sensor renders. I've also included images that have been processed in Lightroom and others in Luminar Neo, both of which will have an icon to indicate the post-processing that's being carried out. A lens that instantly came to mind to pair with the GX10 was the Pentax DA35 Limited, which I've also done a review on and I'll leave a link to that video in the description. I'm not sure if it's just me, but the green tones produced by this camera really come to life with just a few tweaks in post. Now I did say that I'd try the GX10 in a sports setting, which I did, and I paired it with the Tamron 70-300 lens that I mentioned earlier. However, I found that combo was very unreliable in grab and focus, so sadly I ended up with a lot of out of focus images. As you can see, the straight out of camera images are really pleasing, especially when shot in good light, and don't really need that much tweaking. Overall, I'm really impressed with the Samsung GX10. The colours and tones from the CCD sensor are just fantastic. And while the camera does struggle in fast-paced scenarios and low light, when the conditions are just right, this camera really does shine. The GX10 is actually my second Samsung camera to date, and if you enjoyed this video and want to find out what my first Samsung camera was, click on the video up next and I'll see you over there. And as always, thanks for watching.